Beneath the murky surface of a Florida pond lies a hidden killer. This is the story of Eagle's Nest, a sinkhole so deadly, even experts call it the Mount Everest of cave diving. Drive an hour north of Tampa, and you will find the Chassahowitzka Wildlife Management Area. 24,000 acres of swamp, sand, and secrets. Alligators lurk in the marshes. Endangered snakes slither through the brush, but the real danger hides in a small, algae-choked pond. From above, Eagle's Nest looks like a forgotten puddle, slimy, unremarkable, a place to avoid. But dive just 20 feet down, and the illusion shatters. At the bottom of this stagnant pool is a 6-foot-wide hole, a vertical tunnel plunging into darkness. For those brave, foolish enough to enter, it leads to a cavern so vast, divers compare it to an airplane hangar. They call it the ballroom, a pitch-black void where sunlight dies and pressure crushes lungs. But the ballroom is not the end. At its floor lies a debris pile riddled with tunnels. Some lead deeper, others trap divers forever. A sign waits here, bolted to the rock. A grim reaper stares back, scythe in hand. Beneath it, a warning screams in red. Stop! Prevent your own death. Go no farther. The fine print is worse. To dive here, you need advanced certifications, trimix gas training, years of cave experience. Even then, the sign warns, there's nothing in this cave worth dying for. But since 1981, at least 13 people have ignored that warning. 13 lives swallowed by Eagle's Nest. 13 stories of ambition, panic, and ultimately, tragedy. Terry and Jim, December 1981. 29-year-old Terry Sager, a certified cave diver with over 50 log dives, took a crack at Eagle's Nest beside her husband, Larry. The couple had explored this upstream tunnel 3 times before, each dive flawless. Today's plan, a 40-minute excursion to map a side passage at 180 feet. Both carried dual aluminum 80 tanks filled with regular air, standard for recreational dives, but a ticking clock at depth. At 11:42 a.m., they descended through the sinkhole's throat, their halogen beams cutting through the tannin-stained water. The tunnel narrowed to 4 feet wide, its limestone walls jagged and unforgiving. Terry, trailing Larry, gripped his ankle to conserve energy in the current. At 190 feet, nitrogen narcosis began its insidious work. Larry later reported feeling light, almost euphoric, unaware his air consumption had spiked. Then, catastrophe. Terry's hand slipped. Larry turned to find his wife suspended in the gloom, regulator trailing bubbles beside her slack jaw. He lunged, forcing the mouthpiece between her teeth, but she didn't breathe. Panic rising, Larry dragged her 50 feet upward before his own tank hit reserve. With Terry limp and his air dwindling, he made a split-second decision, surface or die. He breached the pond at 12:17 p.m., screaming for help. By cruel fate, Jim Bentz, a 34-year-old PADI instructor and rescue diver, stood on the boardwalk photographing ibises. Hearing Larry's cries, Jim geared up within minutes, taking only a single tank and a handheld light. "I'll have her back in 10, he assured Larry before vanishing into the abyss. He kept half his promise. Recovery teams found Jim's body 2 days later at 250 feet, his pressure gauge reading 0. Autopsies revealed the triple failure. All 3 divers had exceeded the recreational air limit of 130 feet. At their depth, nitrogen narcosis impaired motor skills and critical thinking, while hyperoxic conditions accelerated oxygen toxicity. Terry likely blacked out first, her body found still clutching the guideline. Jim, in his rush, ignored stage tanks and decompression stops. A fatal shortcut. Their deaths marked Eagle's Nest's first recorded fatalities, a grim blueprint for tragedies to come. The cave had issued its warning. Even routine dives here flirt with oblivion. This was just the first of many times that Eagle's Nest would punish ambition. Darren and Dylan. On Christmas Day, 2013, dawn broke over the Chassahowitzka Wildlife Management Area. 42-year-old Darren Spivey, a seasoned cave diver with over a decade of experience, and his 15-year-old son, Dylan, parked their truck near Eagle's Nest. The pair had spent weeks planning this dive, father-son ritual to test the new Hollis Explorer rebreathers they'd gifted each other. Darren, certified in advanced trimix and cave penetration, had logged hundreds of hours in Florida's underwater labyrinths. Dylan, though enthusiastic, held only an open water certification. His training barely scratched the surface of Eagle's Nest's demands. Their plan was straightforward: a quick descent through the algae-choked pond, down the 6-foot-wide throat of the sinkhole, and into the ballroom for a brief exploration. They'd stashed 2 spare air tanks at 90 feet as a precaution, but Dylan, eager to impress his father, lobbied to go deeper. At 10:17 a.m., they slipped beneath the pond's stagnant surface. Flashlights cut through the murk as they navigated the vertical tunnel, its limestone walls narrowing like a serpent's gullet. 20 seconds later, they emerged into the ballroom, a cavern so big their beams barely grazed its ceiling. The water here was colder, heavier, pressure mounting with every foot. Dive computers blinked warnings as they passed 180 feet, but Darren dismissed them. Regular air, 21 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen, had always served him fine. At 233 feet, the nitrogen in their tanks turned traitor. Narcosis hit Dylan first. Laughter bubbled through his regulator as he swam deeper, mesmerized by the void. Darren, his own judgment fogged, failed to check their air supply. For 12 critical minutes, they lingered near the debris pile, unaware their tanks drained faster at depth. By the time Darren glanced at his pressure gauge, they had 500 psi left. Enough for 5 minutes at sea level, but mere seconds at this crushing pressure. Panic erupted. Dylan's tank emptied first. He ripped the backup regulator from his father's shoulder, but sharing air halved their survival time. Darren's vision dimmed as hypoxia set in. He blacked out, sinking toward the silt-covered floor. Dylan, adrenaline overriding training, spat out his regulator and kicked up. His lungs burned. His vision tunneled. He made it 60 feet before hypoxia silenced him. Recovery divers found their bodies the next day. Darren lay crumpled near the debris pile, one hand outstretched toward his son's spare tanks. Dylan floated 20 feet above, mask askew, eyes wide. Autopsies confirmed the cause. Nitrogen narcosis-induced errors, compounded by oxygen starvation. The incident sparked renewed debate in the cave diving community. Forums lit up with warnings about holiday dives and complacency. Yet the sinkhole's ledger had already added two more names, a Christmas tragedy, etched into its limestone walls. Said, but the sinkhole's dangers were not limited to scuba divers. July 18, 2018, the parking lot outside Eagle's Nest buzzed with adrenaline as a group of freedivers unloaded gear from a rented van. Among them was 20-year-old Sed Shalash, a rising star in Floirda's breath-hold community. Unlike scuba divers with their tanks and regulators, these athletes relied on lung capacity alone. Their goal? Push human limits in one of Earth's most lethal underwater arenas. Sed, lean and laser-focused, had trained for months to break his personal depth record, 80 feet. His toolkit was minimalist, a weight belt, low-volume mask, and monofin. No redundancy, no bailout, just a wrist-mounted depth gauge and sheer will. At 3:15 p.m., he hyperventilated at the surface, flooding his bloodstream with oxygen. Then, with a single nod, he arched his back and vanished. Witnesses described his descent as meteoric. Sed pierced the algae layer, slid through the sinkhole's 6-foot throat, and torpedoed into the ballroom. His monofin flickered in the gloom like a bioluminescent creature. At 80 feet, he paused. Record achieved, but the abyss beckoned. He kicked deeper, chasing the debris pile at 150 feet. Nitrogen narcosis, rare in freediving, may have muddled his ascent signals, or perhaps hypoxia silenced his survival instincts. Either way, the clock was ticking, fast. Fellow freedivers plunged after him but faltered at 90 feet, their lungs screaming for air. By the time rescue divers arrived, the ballroom had reclaimed Saeed. His body was recovered near the debris pile, depth gauge frozen at 152 feet. Autopsies ruled out equipment failure or cardiac issues. Cause of death? Officially, drowning secondary to underwater blackout. Unofficially, Eagle's Nest. So why do they still come? For athletes like Saeed, the sinkhole is a siren. Its darkness promises glory, a chance to etch one's name in freediving lore. But beneath that allure lies a grimmer truth. Eagle's Nest does not distinguish between scuba tanks and single breaths. It consumes all who underestimate it, yet still they dive, still they vanish. Because in the end, the cave's greatest danger isn't depth or darkness, it's the human ego. Charles and Davin, while ego may draw divers to Eagle's Nest, its dangers transcend arrogance. Sometimes the cave preys on vulnerabilities no amount of training can prepare you for. January 8, 2017, 55-year-old Charles Osterhout, a recreational diver with 2 years of open water experience, arrived at Eagle's Nest with 3 companions. None had cave certification. Plan? A gentle dive to 60 feet, a depth Charles had mastered in Florida's crystal-clear springs. But Eagle's Nest is no spring. As they geared up, one diver's regulator malfunctioned, spewing air in a frothy torrent. He aborted, leaving Charles and 2 others to descend into the sinkhole's throat. At 90 feet, the water turned ink black. Charles's dive light flickered weakly against the ballroom's walls. Then, at 100 feet, his limbs stiffened. His regulator slipped from his mouth as he floated backward, eyes wide behind his fogging mask. His buddies, both novices, grappled with his dead weight. They inflated his buoyancy compensator, triggering an uncontrolled ascent. Panic overrode procedure. They ignored decompression stops, racing to the surface with Charles in tow. By the time they breached, his lips were cyanotic. CPR failed. Autopsies later revealed a massive myocardial infarction, a heart attack triggered by exertion and depth-induced stress. Charles had no prior cardiac history. Eagle's Nest had exploited a weakness he never knew he had. A year later, on January 20th, 2018, the cave struck again, this time against all odds. 53-year-old Davin Frazier, a commercial pilot and seasoned spearfisherman, entered the ballroom with his dive partner. Greg, Davin's credentials were impeccable. Decades of open water diving, advanced rescue certifications, and a resting heart rate of 45 beats per minute. Their goal, a conservative dive to 70 feet, well within recreational limits. But darkness warps perception. At 65 feet, Davin signaled distress. Greg turned to find him motionless, arms slack at his sides. He grabbed Davin's vest, kicking furiously toward the surface. Halfway up, Davin's body spasmed once before going still. Medics later traced the cause to a sudden cardiac arrhythmia, a cruel twist for a man whose career demanded peak physicality. Two men, two eras, two deaths separated by depth but united by biology. Eagle's Nest does not cause heart attacks. It merely amplifies the risks. The cold constricting blood vessels, pressure straining hearts, the adrenaline spiking cortisol. For some, the cave is a time bomb, and its countdown begins the moment you break the surface. Brent, but heart attacks are not the only silent killers here. Eagle's Nest harbors dangers that lurk in the shadows of human physiology and gas chemistry. Rewind to August 1990. 29-year-old Brent Kimmel, freshly certified in cave diving, but lacking Trimix certification, geared up at Eagle's Nest with two experienced partners. Brent had logged fewer than 10 cave dives, all in shallower systems. Unbeknownst to his team, he had suffered 2 underwater blackouts in the past year during open water dives, incidents he dismissed as flukes. Their plan was modest, a 130-foot descent into the ballroom to practice navigation drills. Brent carried dual aluminum 80 tanks filled with standard 21% oxygen air. At 11:07 a.m., they passed the Grim Reaper's sign. By 150 feet, Brent's movements grew sluggish. His dive light veered erratically across the limestone walls, a telltale sign of nitrogen narcosis. At 190 feet, he went limp. Partners, assuming equipment failure, attempted to share air. Brent's regulator fell from his mouth, bubbles trailing upward. Autopsies found no mechanical issues. The official report listed cause undetermined, though toxicology suggested oxygen toxicity. Unlike Florida's crystalline springs, Eagle's Nest waters brew a toxic cocktail of tannins, leached from rotting cypress roots and peat, staining the depths the color of strong tea. Visibility here is spotty at best. On rare days, sunlight pierces 30 feet down. More often, divers navigate a murky soup where hand signals vanish at arm's length. The slightest misstep, an errant fin stroke, a brushed wall, stirs silt clouds that blot out the world. Even experts resort to touch navigation, fingertips tracing guidelines like Braille. They frog kick to minimize turbulence, hug ceilings to avoid sediment, but the cave is always ready to retaliate. One miscalculation, and the abyss swallows them whole. This volatility once pushed authorities to act. In 1999, after a spate of fatalities, Florida's Fish and Wildlife Commission banned diving at Eagle's Nest. The cave community revolted. Petitions circulated, arguing that education, not prohibition, would save lives. Dive magazines ran op-eds. Instructors lobbied with accident statistics. By 2003, the ban was lifted. Divers returned, buoyed by renewed safety protocols. But triumph curdled into tragedy within a year. John and Craig. June 12, 2004. 36-year-old John Robinson, a decade-certified cave diver, and 44-year-old Craig Simon, his less experienced protege, geared up at the pond's edge. John brought a Cis Lunar Mark 5P underwater scooter, a propeller-driven device meant to conserve energy in strong currents. At 1:15 p.m., they descended. The scooter's thrusters whirred, propelling them through the ballroom, but its wake churned silt like a blender. Within minutes, a whiteout engulfed them. Disoriented, John abandoned the scooter and grabbed the nylon guideline, a lifeline strung through the tunnels. But in zero visibility, he misread the directional arrows. Instead of surfacing, he swam deeper. His body was recovered 1,000 feet into an upstream tunnel. Main and backup tanks drained. Craig, trailing behind, missed the bailout tanks they'd staged. Desperate, he veered into an offshoot, where his guideline tangled in a limestone snag. Rescuers found him at 290 feet, knotted in ropes, his pressure gauge pegged at 0. 2 men, 1 lesson. Technology may fail, but the cave does not. Chris and Patrick. Even meticulous planning crumbles here. October 16, 2016. Patrick Peacock and Chris Rittenmeyer, veteran divers with hundreds of cave hours, spent a full day prepping. They stashed 12 tanks along Eagle's Nest tunnels, Trimix for deep penetration, oxygen-rich blends for decompression. Their friend Justin Kramer monitored their ascent from the surface. At 2:30 p.m., Patrick and Chris splashed down, armed with rebreathers. rebreathers, devices that recycle exhaled gas, extending dive times. 49 minutes in, they reached the pit, a notorious restriction where the tunnel narrows to 3 feet. Patrick entered first, wriggling through the gap. Chris followed. Seconds later, they retreated, likely spooked by silt dislodged from the ceiling. At 58 minutes, Patrick's rebreather, a $15,000 unit, lay discarded on the cave floor. Why? Forensic analysis found no malfunction. Had nitrogen narcosis convinced him it was faulty? We'll never know. Buddy breathing from Chris's tank, they inched forward. 85 minutes in, their shared air ran out. Autopsies confirmed suffocation. Patrick's body was lodged in the restriction, one arm outstretched. Chris lay 10 feet back, fingers clawing at silt. Their stash of bailout tanks sat untouched, 30 feet overhead, a gutting testament to disorientation. 13 deaths, countless near misses, yet divers still flock here. Why? For glory, for the raw, primal high of surviving what others cannot, for social media bragging rights. Technical divers whisper about unmapped tunnel and virgin passages. Free divers chase depth records, ignoring how the ballroom's pressure warps time and perception. But the Grim Reaper's sign does not sway. Its message, there's nothing in this cave worth dying for, fades under algae and time. Yet its truth remains. Eagle's Nest is not conquered. It is endured, and even then, only briefly. The sinkhole's reputation as a diver's graveyard only fuels its allure. Like moths to a flame, adventurers flock here, lured by the same stories that should terrify them. But again, why? For some, it is the challenge. For others, the haunting beauty of the ballroom's void. Psychologists call it the Everest effect, the compulsion to conquer what has defeated others. Yet unlike Everest, Eagle's Nest offers no summit flags, no glory, just darkness and death. To understand its lethality, we must go back millions of years. During the Pleistocene epoch, sea levels fluctuated wildly, exposing Florida's limestone bedrock to relentless acidic rain. Over millennia, groundwater carved vast subterranean chambers. As glaciers melted, rising seas flooded these caves with salt water, dissolving weaker limestone and collapsing ceilings. Eagle's Nest's vertical entrance, a 6-foot wide shaft, is one such collapse. The ballroom, its central chamber, spans 200 feet wide and 90 feet tall, its walls pockmarked by ancient erosion. But time did not stabilize this labyrinth. The limestone remains friable, fracturing under stress. Silt layers, deposited by prehistoric floods, coat every surface like powdered chalk. Disturb them, and visibility drops to 0, a death sentence for the disoriented. Compare it to Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas. At 663 feet, Dean's is deeper, yet safer. Its bell-shaped profile allows gradual descent. Sunlight penetrates its azure waters, illuminating coral-lined walls. Freedivers like William Trubridge train here, breaking depth records on single breaths. Fatalities, rare. Dean's demands respect but rewards preparation. Eagle's Nest, it punishes everything. Even the most meticulous divers face invisible threats. Take nitrogen narcosis. Beyond 130 feet, nitrogen saturates the bloodstream, impairing cognitive function. In Eagle's Nest, this rapture of the deep pairs with claustrophobia. Narrow tunnels squeeze to 3 feet wide. Silt-outs erase visual cues, enough to break both the mind and body. However, modern safety protocols have evolved to counter these risks. Divers now use trimix, a blend of helium, oxygen, and nitrogen to reduce narcosis. Underwater drones like the Blue Eye Pioneer map tunnels in advance, relaying 3D models to surface team. Checklists are sacrosanct, gas mixtures verified via gas analyzers, bailout tanks pressure tested, dive plans etched on waterproof slates. But technology is not a cure-all. In 2004, John Robinson's underwater scooter triggered a silt-out, dooming him and Craig Simon. And in 2016, Patrick Peacock and Chris Rittenmeyer discarded functioning rebreathers in a narcosis-fueled panic, suffocating in a restriction. Decompression sickness, Benz, is another specter. Ascend too fast, and nitrogen bubbles tear through tissues. Survivors liken it to glass shards in the joints. But in Eagle's Nest, slow ascents are a luxury. Panic steals time, air runs out, and choices turn fatal. Yet the deadliest threat, complacency. After Patrick and Chris's deaths, the diving community debated, is Eagle's Nest uniquely lethal or just frequently dived? Data is scarce, but one fact is particularly haunting. Of the 13 confirmed deaths, most involved certified divers, experts, people who knew better. Today, Eagle's Nest remains open. No gates, no guards, just the Grim Reaper's sign, its red paint flaking under algae. Reputable dive shops like Cave Country Dive Store enforce strict protocols, proof of full cave certification, gear inspections, guided tours only. But rogue operators thrive. For $200 cash, unlicensed guides rent tanks to uncertified thrill seekers. The families of the lost plead for closure, for answers, but the cave gives none. Darren Spivey's widow donated his gear to the National Diving Museum, sealed in a glass case labeled Last Dive. Brent Kimmel's parents scatter flowers into the pond each August. The Grim Reaper's sign still stands, a relic, a prophecy. Its warning, there's nothing in this cave worth dying for, etched into rust. But for those who dare descend, the void answers with a truth no diver escapes. In Eagle's Nest, nature writes the rules.